everybody, today's lesson is all about prepositions of place and prepositions of transportation. So in today's video we're going to talk about how to use in, on, and at when we're talking about place, and we're going to learn how to use in and on when talking about transportation. Ready? Let's do it. Please be aware that these are general rules. This is English, so of course there are always exceptions, but these are just some basic guidelines that can help you and steer you towards the right direction of choosing the correct preposition. So first, let's start with prepositions of place. Number one is in, and I'm going to use this cat as an example throughout this video just so you can get a visual and also because I love cats. So first, in. So we use in when we're referring to this cat or anything being inside of a place or an object. So it might be helpful to think of in as having walls or boundaries. So for example, this cat is in the box. This box has walls or boundaries. You can also say in the house. The house has walls, boundaries. And in a country also, countries have not really walls, of course they have boundaries, so you can say in a country as well. In general, we usually use in when we're talking about an object with an empty or hollow space, so like a cup, a box, a bag. We can use in when we're talking about a room or a building. We can use in when we're talking about a city, a country, or a state. For example, in San Francisco, or in the USA, or in Florida. And we can use in when we're talking about specific neighborhoods or districts. So for example, you could say in Chinatown, or in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, etc., etc. Next, we have on. So when do we use on? Normally, we use on when we're talking about this cat or anything being on top of a place, or especially a surface. So in this case, this cat is on the couch or the sofa. He's on the surface of it. He's not physically inside of it, he's on the surface. Following this idea, we commonly use on when we're talking about touching or being on top of the surface of a solid object, such as a piece of furniture or a floor. And speaking of floors, we also use on when we're referring to where something is on a street or an avenue, unless it has a specific number attached to it. So you would say on Main Street, but if you're giving an exact address, like let's say 233 Main Street, then we don't use on, we actually use at. But if there's no number attached to it, then you can use on. And similarly, we use on to talk about floors. So if you are living in an apartment and you are on the 5th floor, then you use on to describe the location of the floor. Lastly, we have at. At is used with very specific locations, usually with places that we view having a very specific role or activity. They have a purpose. We go there for a specific reason. So for example, you would say I'm at school. And the reason we would say I'm at school is because school has a very particular purpose. We go there for a reason, to learn, right? That's the same reason why people say at home instead of in home. We always say at home because we have a particular reason to be there. We live there. That's different from saying in a home. If you're in a home, you're just describing where you are, and it doesn't necessarily give you an indication that that place has a particular purpose in your life. You're just describing a physical location at that time. But if you're at home, we know that that's the place where you live. That's the reason that you're there. Again, we also use at with specific addresses with numbers. So if your home address is, for example, 255 Main Street, then you can say I live at 255 Main Street. Before, I said that if you don't have this number attached to it, you can't use at, you would use on. So you could either say here, I live at 255 Main Street, or if you're being less specific, you could say I live on Main Street. And lastly, we use at with most stores. So for example, I'm at Walmart. Normally, again, you can think of this at as there's a reason why we are at Walmart. It serves a purpose. We do one particular activity there, and that's why we're using at. So before we move on to prepositions of transportation, let's just quickly summarize prepositions of place. So remember, we use in when we want to describe something that is inside an object with empty space, like a cup. When we want to describe something that is inside buildings, rooms, neighborhoods or districts, cities, or countries. We use on when we want to describe something that is on the surface or on top of a solid object, and for that reason, that's why it's used for things like streets or avenues, as long as they don't have a specific address attached to them, or floors of a building. And lastly, we use at when we want to describe something that is located somewhere with a very specific purpose or function, for exact addresses and for most stores. Next, let's talk about prepositions of transportation. For transportation, we normally only use two prepositions, either in or on. So let's learn about the difference. Let's start with in. Now, we normally use in travel when we want to describe something that is inside a small mode of transportation, even if it isn't completely enclosed. So for example, you are in a car, or you could be in a canoe, for instance. Since in works for cars, it can also be applied to different types of cars. So you can say in a truck, in a minivan, in an SUV. And it also works for things like taxis. I'm in a taxi. Or you can even say I'm in an Uber. Finally, let's talk about on. So in general, we use on when we're talking about something being on top or on the surface of a small mode of transportation, or when we're talking about someone or something being inside a large mode of transportation. So here are some examples, of course. So we have this cat is on a bike. He's not physically inside of anything, he's on the surface of the bike. And in the second picture, he's on a bus. A bus is a large mode of transportation, and so he's inside of it, so we would say he is on a bus. Similarly, we can say things like the cat is on a skateboard. He's on a skateboard because he's on the surface of a small mode of transportation. You can say the cat is on a boat or on a plane. It's a large mode of transportation that he is inside. Okay, let's just quickly summarize the two prepositions of transportation. So the first one is in, which is mostly used when we're talking about something that is inside a small mode of transportation, even if it is not completely enclosed. This is mostly used with cars, different types of cars, and even car services such as taxis or Ubers. And on. If you have to choose between in or on is usually a better guess because it's used with more types of transportation. But in general, we use on for something that is on top of or on the surface of a small mode of transportation, such as a bike or a skateboard, or we use it when we're talking about something being inside of a large mode of transportation, such as a plane, a bus, or a train. Alright, so in this video, you learned how to use in, on, and at when talking about place, and how to use in and on when talking about transportation. I hope this video was useful, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, everybody.